Hello and welcome back to the MCR. My name is Matt, and I'm going to start out part two of our interview with a gentleman we're calling YP for anonymity's sake. He's from the Ukraine. He's got a lot of very interesting things to say. You're going to want to watch this one to the end. But I also want to throw out, this is our 500th episode. We started on January 20th, 2019, and we finally made it to number 500. It's been a fun ride. Hope you'll join us by subscribing, liking, and sharing to this video. It really is important to us. We're on 4 platforms now. It's BitChute is our primary, YouTube, HugeTube, Rumble, where we really struggle on Rumble. So if you're a Rumble lover, please watch us on Rumble. We really need the help there. So let's get into part 2 of this interview.
All this is about.
Sorry, I didn't catch that. Can you speak?
So Putin basically just got his feelings hurt, and that's what all this is about.
Well, not even feelings hurt, but I think the regime feels threatened by a successful state nearby. He already feels threatened by the Baltics and Poland, because these were all in the Soviet orbits. There were states that were allied with the Soviet Union, and then they are now significantly more successful than Russia.
Hey, YP, I got a couple questions / theories here. Would it be safe to say that Zelensky was dealing with his own version of deep state?
Well, I don't know how you can apply these American concepts to there, but he definitely is dealing with a lot of ingrained corruption. He is dealing with a lot of powerful interests. So he had to tread carefully, but he was able to.
Okay, that's kind of deep state.
actually start cleaning up. So he was able to fire several people. He was able to appoint new non-corrupt people. At least looking at the Ukrainian government, at least from what I know, the fraction of the people who are in government, most of them now live in Ukraine. They don't have I saw a picture of Zelensky's parents. So his dad is a lecturer at the local small university. They live like common people. You know, they live in an apartment. They don't live in a mansion in Monaco or London. So it seems like he was able to crack down on that culture of corruption. There's still more work to be done, but the progress has been tremendous he hasn't been in power that long, and but he has a lot of actual accomplishments in that regard.
A follow-up question that I have is, because you mentioned deep corruption within the government of Ukraine. Do you think Putin was kind of betting on that to somehow facilitate the success of him invading?
Oh, definitely. So,
okay. All right.
And I think that before the army was corrupt, after the revolution in 2014, there was a lot of collaboration between Russian. Well, I would say, let's call a spade a spade. There was some treasonous behavior there, where there were some spies within the Ukrainian army who were feeding Russians information, and then slowly Ukraine was able to kind of clean up the act, and now the army is actually, despite the lack of resources, lack of ammunition, they're fighting as one unit. There's a lot less corruption there, so they're able to put up, I'm not an expert in military matters, but it seems like they're able to put up a much better fight against the Russians than anyone expected, just because there's less corruption, there's less shortages because of that. Because what's happening in the Russian army, from what I hear from my friends, is the Russian government sent a tremendous amount of money to reform the army and re-equip it. But, at the first level, generals steal it. Then at the local, then it kind of, by the time it gets to the bottom, only a fraction of the resources get spent on the intended targets. And the vast majority of the stuff gets corrupted away and ends up as generals' yachts, mansions, and so forth.
So I know you have like I said, friends and families down there and actual boots on the ground over there. Is there anything that you feel that yourself you might want to clear up that the mainstream media is actually either A, blown out of proportion or just completely lied about?
Well, I think the biggest is, so you said, clear up kind of misinformation from the mainstream media.
Yeah.
You got to realize we don't
Yes.
trust hardly anything we see or hear. You know, we feel like we're sifting through a bunch of garbage trying to find the truth here.
Yeah, I mean, I think the coverage is, it's kind of hard for the media to cover it because without giving a lot of background. But I think one of the biggest misconceptions is, and I think I already touched on that, that's calling people speaking Russian as pro-Russian. There's a very big difference now between speaking the Russian language and being pro-Russian. So, and that doesn't get covered enough. The other thing that doesn't get covered enough is how much kind of repression there is in Russia. So in Russia, people are wondering, like, oh, why do these people, American Russians living here, why do they, I mean, of course, I'm not defending people who are openly supporting Putin, but it's quite different for them to speak out against him if they have family there, because it's kind of, you have to think about the regime that they did use radioactive substances to poison their
I was just going to say they poisoned people.
They used chemical agents, so they did not stop at hurting someone's family if they speak out. It's definitely possible. So right now, for example, they blocked Facebook, blocked Twitter, blocked I think YouTube. So they're basically in the span of like a couple of weeks, they're turning from a moderately repressive state to the state that's like North Korea.
Yeah. I have.
Like even mentioning war is illegal now.
Yeah.
You have to call it a special military operation. If you say war in the context of Ukraine, they just passed a law where you could go to jail for 15 years.
Earlier, when we spoke before we began the segment here, I mentioned to you how I have a friend associate who also has family members that live in Ukraine, and I mentioned that that this person did have some concerns regarding Belarus and acting as kind of a thug at the behest of Russia. If there's any comments you might have as far as that.
Yeah, so Belarus is it's definitely a valid concern, and so Belarus already is acting as an enemy to Ukraine because most of the invasion that's driven towards Kiev is originating in Belarus. So Russia put the troops to Belarus, and then they crossed the Ukraine-Belarusian border. So it made Ukraine's situation much worse because had they not done that, they have to come from the Far East, and it would have been much easier to defend the country. So Belarus is already acting as a hostile nation to Ukraine, but so as far as the background, they kind of have a really tight rope to walk because their dictator, it's not in his interest to attack Ukraine. He has nothing to gain from it. He just wants to stay in power, but at the same time, he is Putin's servant, so he's heavily dependent on Putin. Putin sent troops to help Belarusian dictator Lukashenko to stay in power when there was a revolt against him. So he owes him. He knows he depends on him. He depends on subsidized Russian gas and oil. So he's pretty much doing whatever Putin is telling him to do.
Hey, what's the relationship between Poland and Ukraine? There's a reason why I asked that question.
Right now, I would say Poland is the main ally of Ukraine,
and that's what I thought. That's why I asked
they can to help.
Yeah.
So that's another interesting situation. So there's a lot of official reasons that Russia is giving to invading Ukraine. Goes back to events that happened during World War II. And there was I would say there's a lot more reasons for Ukraine and Poland not to get along based on those events rather than Russia and Ukraine. But yet Poland moved on, Ukraine moved on, and they're kind of living in the present, but Russia is still fighting the ghosts of World War II. So right now, as far as Poland, it's doing everything it can to help Ukraine. It's
that's
over 1 million refugees, including some of my classmates. It so what Ukraine did is one thing I want to say about refugees. So Ukraine is sending especially mothers with small children and old people to Poland, but then men 18 to 60, they have to stay, and overwhelmingly they want to stay and fight. And then some of the women who don't have children, they choose to stay. Most of the women who don't have children choose to stay and fight too. So Poland is helping with refugees, it's helping with supplies, it's helping diplomatically. I mean, most of it is out of the just kind of how upset everyone is in the West by this blatant aggression, but also they realize that, if Ukraine falls, they would be next. Because they're definitely one of the biggest enemies of Putin's regime. So,
see,
should Ukraine fall, I expect, at least for the West, to be ready to decide what they want to do as far as NATO commitments, because they're in the NATO, and Putin is definitely planning to take on either the Baltic states or Poland.
Yes. And that would have to occur. Basically, they would have to use Belarus as a launching off point. That's why I kind of had a series of questions there for you. That's all.
Well, but I think it would use if Putin would take over Ukraine, they would use Ukraine as a launching pad. The reason why they wouldn't, even though there's a big border between Belarus and Poland, those areas, they're so marshy. It's one big swamp there. So it's very, very difficult to conduct military operations there. So ideally what he wants to do, I think, is to take over Ukraine and launch an invasion of Poland via Western Ukraine, because there the terrain is a little better. Still difficult, but not as difficult as through Belarus.
But either way, Poland has the potential of being the next target.
One of the next targets, and it wouldn't be. I'm not sure how likely it would be an all-out invasion, given that Poland is part of NATO. Although I wouldn't put it past him to do it. But they would also be dealing with little terrorist attacks, hacking. It would definitely, they would be definitely living next to a very hostile nation.
All right. YP. We definitely honor and appreciate your time with us, because we're coming up on 30 minutes now. Which
I feel very honored to have talked to you in this segment.
It's really nice to be able to get a true perspective of what's going on over there from lack of better terms.
Well, it is a perspective, though. I just want to make it clear. It is my perspective. These are my views. I mean, I guess it's possible that it's likely that someone would have a different take on this. This is just my take from what I saw, what I read about the station, what I hear from people on the ground.
Even with that being said, you have confirmed some of what I've been able to conclude in my research of this event. So thank you very much.
Like I said, we're honored.
We're great talking to you guys.
We're gonna go ahead and wrap this up now.
Hey, you got any closing in Ukraine you might want to say or share?
Can you repeat the question? It's breaking up.
Would you have a phrase or closing that you could share in Ukraine and tell us what it means?
Well, so as far as closing statements, you said?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people in the U.S. ask, well, why should we care about this? Why is this important? I just think it is very important because in a number of reasons. One is non-proliferation. So Ukraine gave up the third largest nuclear arsenal in the world at the time in 1994 in exchange for security guarantees from Russia, UK, and US. And so we kind of put our name on the line, saying, well, we don't want to have Ukraine to have nukes, because at the time it was an unstable country, and I think it was a sound policy at the time to ask them to get rid of nukes. But now it's being attacked, and if we don't do anything and don't do our best to protect them, every other country in the world would want to get nukes, because they were like, well, these assurances, they don't mean much. And we'll be living in a world where if everyone has nukes, on one hand, there will be higher barrier to using them, but on the other hand, it only takes one crazy actor to use them, and then, nukes start flying back and forth. So it's important to kind of to show maximum support for Ukraine. I know there are risks involved with going out. I was dealing with a crazy dictator with lots of nukes, but at the same time, you have one dictator with lots of nukes. Within maybe 20 years, if we kind of let Ukraine fall, every country that's able to get nukes will get nukes, and there'll be chance more opportunities for terrorists to get them and so forth. So the other thing is if you look at history, there's never an example where a dictator says, "Hey, we can." Let's say he gets what he wants, and then he's like, "Okay, I got what I want. People appease me. I'm done." That never happens, no matter what. So if we let Ukraine fall, he will just go on to the next target. It could be in a month, it could be in a week, it could be in 2 years, but there will be a next time. Until he's thoroughly defeated, I think the defeat should come from economic sanctions and maybe some military engagements in Ukraine, like the Air Force and so forth. He will not stop. So he will never end until he is stopped. So I understand, I'm very sympathetic to the viewpoints where I say, well, we shouldn't get involved. But at the same time, I think we're fooling ourselves, and we'll have to get involved when he attacks a NATO country. And he will attack a NATO country if he's not stopped.
Yeah, he comes across as a guy that the only thing he understands is brute force. That's my impression.
Absolutely. I think we have to tread carefully because he has a large nuclear arsenal. I'm not sure what percentage of it is operational, but excuse me, but some of it is probably operational. So we have to tread carefully. But I do think the best way to deal with him is to be firm. I think the reason why we're here today is with the whole situation is, especially during Obama years, he went for an appeasement policy. He canceled the missile defense program with Poland and Czech Republic. He kind of didn't do much with when Putin broke Ukraine's sovereignty and attacked Crimea. So he tried to appease him, thinking, okay, well, the problem will go away. And it kind of did during his presidency. But so for him personally, I think it was a benefit. But for the country, now for his successors, they have to deal with a much, much bigger crisis. So, for example, I'd say one last thing, that just a few days ago there was heavy fighting near one of the nuclear power stations, and it's the largest nuclear power station in Europe. Probably one of the largest in the world, so it's about 6 times larger than Chernobyl. So, if that station got destroyed, the fallout would be pretty bad for not just for Ukraine, but for a large chunk of Europe. So that's another reason why. And there are 5 power stations, large nuclear power stations in Ukraine. There are a lot of nuclear objects there, so there are like some storage facilities. So it could definitely create an environmental catastrophe if the war continues.
Okay.
All right. So, so we're going to wrap this up now. We're definitely, we've pretty much gone triple of what we normally do. So, thanks everybody for sticking around and soldiering through. YP, once again, thank you very much for your time. It has been an honor.
Great talking to you guys.
Yeah, thanks.
And we'll see you guys on the next flip side.